Okay, I'd like to call to order the Village of Lansing Planning Board meeting for Monday, April 8th to order at 7 p.m. We do have a quorum, and Lisa, are you a voting member tonight or not?
I am, please.
Okay, so even though Lisa's remote, she is, and Yamila, we can appoint Yamila as an alternate member tonight too,
Yeah,
so.
I don't know whether she's.
Yamila, are you, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I am here. I'm able to vote, and actually, I will be
Jim right
there
there.
with you in about 4.5 minutes.
Oh, okay, actually, wait, Jim is here, so, well, we'll wait. Because I think Jim was just, I'll give Jim a second.
Okay.
We'll wait for you, though. We've got a couple other things we can chat about.
Yeah,
Jim,
I'm just passing the Lansing Rec center right now.
Oh, she's in the car.
I'll be there in a few.
Okay, Jim, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just having a little trouble getting the iPad to turn on video and camera.
Okay.
It seems to be good. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. And I think you're not voting tonight, right?
I'm just a member of the public tonight,
Okay.
so I'm not.
Okay. Should I wait until Emil gets here to point out? I don't know how it works in transit from virtual to in-person.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Okay, so I will appoint Emil then as a voting member for tonight's meeting. There's not much on the agenda tonight. I know the big thing is to talk about tree law changes, so in lieu of canceling the meeting tonight, we can chat about that, we can get some things done. I would like to try to end no later than 8:30 with everything, if not before that, so just there's some things happening tonight. Mike. But the first item on the agenda is, the approval of minutes. We've got one set of minutes from March 26, 2024. I know folks got a chance to get edits out, where I used to say they didn't have any edits, so if there's no other changes, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for March 26, 2024.
I move we approve.
Motion by Pat.
Second.
Second by Lorraine, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Amelia. Next item on the agenda is the public comment period, so this is an opportunity for anyone from the public to say anything that's not already on the agenda tonight.
Susan Ainsley, liaison to Board of Trustees.
Hey, Susan.
Hello.
I'm Carla Marceau. I'm here as an observer for the community party.
And hey, Carla. Okay, hearing no other comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public comment period.
I move to close the public comment period.
Motion by Lisa.
Second.
Oops, second by Lorraine, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Amelia. There you go, perfect. Technology. So next item on the agenda is discussion of possible tree law changes. So sorry, I know some people emailed me. Sorry, I did not get your email, Lisa. I was on vacation and I purposely did not do anything other than use the internet when I had it to talk to my children. So I disconnected from the world for a while. I got all my news updates from the people from Jersey and New York City on the cruise ship. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But I did, Lisa, Mike just emailed you we all have a printed copy in front of us of the tree law. Mike did just email you a little bit ago a copy of it too.
And Jim.
Okay.
And Jim, and you too, Jim.
Yeah, I can't see the meeting and the tree law at the same time, unfortunately.
Okay. But so we'll obviously, we'll talk through things. I do have some notes here, though. Lisa and I had met to talk about this, and I know Yamila had some notes too. Let me bring these up really quick. I say really quick, and then they're in here somewhere. When was that, Lisa, that we
Oh, geez.
yeah, I know.
A month ago, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's why I asked
Okay.
you to send it to me, because I
Yep,
couldn't. Find it.
this was something different, so, and this is, I think, is this in?
See,
so
the
some of
one
this-
I'm working on, I would like to just put in another plug for usual is that we should, these need to be dated, but I think I just finally just printed out the one from the code to work with today.
That's exactly what we have in front of us, so that's what we're working off of tonight. I'm just looking up some of the notes that I had. So, yeah,
Oh,
no,
okay.
we are working on the one that's
Yeah.
out of the code.
Oh, I actually,
I got it.
You got
I did come across some of those, but I was having trouble. I don't know. I was having some technology issues, I guess, or operator error, no doubt, but yeah, I will remember what we discussed. They were mostly Millis comments and I think some from Natalie, no?
Yeah, and we had some too, so I have those captured.
Exactly.
So there, some of Yamila comments were not necessarily, and we can revisit that as something different, not necessarily about the tree lot itself, but about buffer. There's some sections in the code that are related about buffer strips and things like that, so we should revisit them as well, just because they are all kind of related, not necessarily to the tree lot itself, but to, a lot of the work we do with, anytime a developer comes in and we make them put in a buffer, and there were some really good comments in there about cleaning up some language and some other things, but as far as the, the actual tree law itself goes, so everybody has the copy in front of you, and it should be, we'll use the page numbers at the bottom there, so. On 145.022, so the first page there that everybody has, the first note that we had was from section B there. It says removal of trees from any tax parcel. So removal of more than 25% of trees from any tax parcel within 3 calendar years is prohibited. So there was a comment in there about how do we find out if a property is approaching this limit or has passed that limit?
That was a discussion we
Yeah,
had when we
and we
drafted it.
had that discussion, so. Hey, Amelia.
Apologies,
Well,
I was-
Yamila had a conversation with the forestry guy too, that, he said, yeah, who's determining that? And
Right,
what happens if, and there were some really good comments there. My problem was as I started to take a new fresh look at this is, I don't know, I feel like it's not as simple to change as I thought originally.
I think there are some that are simple, but I think there are some that are really more robust, and so, I think, the purpose, I glanced over that because that is, that's just, I don't want to try to rewordsmith something unless there's something glaring in there, but I do kind of want to work down this line by line, and that's why I started with B, because, yeah, Lisa's right, as we worked through this and looked at comments and talked about it, we thought it would be worthwhile to just revisit it, because there are a lot of sections that have some thoughts about it or comments.
So my recollection when we discussed, well, how we're gonna know who's gonna go count the trees, was more so that this was to prevent obvious clear cutting of lots, where it'd be evident that either all or half of the trees are gone, similar to what happened, I believe, on Dart, is what everyone was upset about.
Yep.
And so we weren't too much, we're concerned that people are removing 25% of the trees, but are we gonna figure out if they removed 27% of the trees? Probably not, but we'll know if they removed half or all.
Yep.
And that was kind of the goal of that section.
You're gonna know in an obvious situation.
Yeah,
Right, in obvious situations, you'll know, right, if I, in my backyard, not that I'm going to, figured out, oh, okay, well, that means I can only cut down 15 in the next 3 years, and I cut down 17, right? Nobody's probably gonna know. Right.
I just don't think we have the resources
Right.
to monitor it, it'd be more of a obvious
Yeah.
violation.
Then, okay, so the question I would have then, are we concerned with like the aesthetics of what it looks like from the road, or are we concerned about the functions, like the ecological functions of having tree coverage? Because if we're talking about whether something is obvious or not, that begs a point of view, right? So if we're,
Yeah,
so if we're looking at like, is this an aesthetic concern, there, we have one set of ways we can look at this, but if we're talking about an ecological concern or how stormwater, like, they just did a bunch of clearing on this lot right back here, which backs up to my house, the water patterns in my house are completely different now. You know, so
I was-
there are ecological functions that change when people move trees. So what's our concern here?
Could I raise my hand on that one?
Go.
In fact, I wanted to back up. When I started to look at this and I looked back at some of the other tree ordinances and that stuff that I'd sent around with everybody about private land ordinances in Westchester County and the Nassau Board. And, you know, one of the things that I don't like about our purpose is I really think that we don't stress enough the ecological importance. And, you know, I just remember somebody saying once, well, you can't legislate aesthetics to a certain extent. Like you can't tell somebody they can't paint their house purple unless it's homeowners association, I suppose. But if you're talking about something less than a homeowners association, I'm very concerned about the ecological stuff. I obviously care a lot about the aesthetics too, but I realize that probably that is a little subjective, but to me, preserving, as you said, how water flows and, you know, whether we have enough air to breathe and all, and wind breaks and all that, I think that's crucial. And I'm wondering if our purpose statement is strong enough on that. Just saying.
So I think the purpose statement, so a couple things. One, I think the purpose statement covers that, right? We specifically talk about wind breaks, we specifically talk about stormwater runoff, erosion, effects of climate change, you know, carbon dioxide, things like that. We can modify it, I just question, and I think this happened when we were talking about the solar law, and you know, the trustees picked up on it too, is, you know, how much of this gigantic, huge, robust thing do we want to build into into the, you know, this chunk of it that ends up in the code.
Right.
We do mention those things. I think your point is, should we mention,
Addressed, yeah.
should there be stronger language? I don't know if stronger language is gonna make any difference if, you know, if we say, you know, an important environment, you know, reducing stormwater runoff and erosion versus really reducing stormwater runoff and erosion, it's addressed in
No.
there, it's.
I could probably come up with some suggestions about, but maybe this is where we put, I don't know where, one of the things that I had noticed too, when, and something we asked the Drug and Council to do when they did their renovations was to protect current trees and the root zones from being, you know, damaged so that they wouldn't die. And we don't really mention that in this code. And I think we need to introduce that. And in fact, it was one of the points that I think this fellow that answered Yamila's email so nicely mentioned that as well. And so I think somewhere we should put that. I'm not sure purpose is the place for it, but I think we have to stress some of that kind of stuff more than the aesthetics and stuff.
Yeah,
frankly.
I wonder if that either should be part of a different, not part of the tree conservation and planning piece so much as something to do with, or maybe it isn't here, or like something, there's that buffering area, there's other different parts that mention it too, you know, maybe, hey, maybe you have plenty of tree units and you're not cutting any trees down and all you're doing is adding trees, but oh, by the way, we really want you to protect the trees that are there, so that won't fall under here during the project necessarily, it might fall elsewhere. I know that.
Part of the landscape plan, really, I suppose, but I just want to be sure that somewhere we don't forget that is all.
Yeah, and maybe this is the right place for it, and Yamila said maybe it is both, and that's fine, I'm just curious. There could be some things like we do, you know, the SWIP, you know, you need to take care of that, but there could be projects that don't fall under this at all, that we would still maybe want to have some call out to protect the trees.
Well, I think that was an indirect way why we only counted new trees regardless of their size as a 1, is to incentivize people to protect existing trees. That was part of the discussion when we were allotting tree units, that no matter the size, a new tree was only 1, while you would get more points per se for existing trees.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if that answers the question before, you know, about how do we find out if it's approaching the limit? I mean, we don't necessarily, we don't have a tree inventory of every tree in the village.
Right.
And I think that's administratively burdensome for us to
Yeah,
come up
nor
with
do I
that.
think we really have the authority to go in without somebody asking us for a building permit or a special permit to say, no, you can't remove that tree because of stormwater runoff, and you can't remove that tree. That becomes overly burdensome, not only on the village, but I think it's overstepping a boundary for us to regulate which trees can be removed if they're not coming to us for a permit or something like that. Like,
Right, so it's only triggered with a permit.
Especially,
well, for us having more control over the tree placement, but for this removal provision, if they remove trees and it happens to increase storm runoff to another parcel, that's kind of outside our scope here. It's unfortunate for the neighboring parcel, but.
Well, okay. So what does happen if, you know, a neighbor does a thing that negatively impacts the stormwater runoff?
As long as
Next
you
door.
don't purposefully reroute the water, i.e. grading down towards you or put a pipe onto your property, then it becomes a private nuisance, but otherwise, they can landscape and change their property that causes stormwater runoff in various directions without any really sort of recourse.
Okay.
You're responsible for the water that comes onto your property, that it is conveyed off of your property
Right,
in a ethical way, basically.
right, but when a person
Into your.
right, but when a person changes the trees of their property, it changes how the water is conveyed from their property to a neighboring property. How do we, and that's gonna become a thing that's gonna be a bigger deal as we have more intense storms. It's gonna be more obvious. So if it comes up in the future, what would we have to say? Like, you know, I took out that giant willow tree at the corner of my property, and now my neighbor's basement gets flooded. So I changed the way the stormwater moves across my property by moving that tree. So I no longer convey the water the way I did before. How do we handle that?
There's no recourse in case law. I mean, they've tried cases like that, and they have found that that is insufficient for private nuisance.
Interesting, okay. All right, then that's what that is. Okay.
yeah.
So but I have a question, because I wanted to find out about this. I know when we were looking at the solar law, we tried to step away from language that was like, not objective. And in the second line, we have purposeless and indiscriminate removal. Like, purposeless feels like it's a very squishy word.
Where do you see that?
It's right under a purpose.
Oh, there we go, gotcha, okay.
And I just, yeah, it's felt to me to be like a squishy word, like it could mean lots of different things. And I know we were trying to move away from that and be more exacting, so your advice about how we handle something like that would be great.
We can certainly work on reworking the purpose paragraph. I think that the purposeless and indiscriminate, again, kind of went back to the clear cutting of those lots without any sort of plan in place. They're clear cut without anyone coming for a building permit or any sort of inclination about what would happen in those lots, where at that time it was purposeless to cut down all those trees, when in reality, perhaps they could have kept them on the lot had they come with a plan and had a plan of where the house was gonna go and where the driveway was gonna go before they clear cut it in total. I think that was the intent behind that language there.
Could we just replace purposeless with clear cut?
Well, there might be cases where you do need
I
to
was
clear
gonna say,
cut.
yep.
I mean, I don't think we want to just prohibit clear cutting, but there's recourse if they do need to clear cut for some reason.
Well, one of the other things is as you continue on, it says within the village, blah, 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 to ensure the planting and restoration during the development and subdivision. And so then later, but if there's a special permit, so not everybody is, when somebody like is development, does that cover like the situation we had with my neighbor? Well, that was development.
I think that
because
is development.
It is development, yeah, that's development.
And so, but if somebody comes for a special permit to add like, I don't know what, I guess anything, is everything covered by that word, I guess is what I'm asking. That is,
It's all development.
I would say it is all covered, and I also think the purpose paragraph is less controlling than the actual language of the code.
Oh, yeah,
yeah, it is.
oh, yeah.
This is just a general overview of what we're doing here, and then you get into the nitty gritty.
Okay.
Because it doesn't mention the special permit, but of course, during the, yeah, okay. I was just wondering about that when I was reading it.
Okay. So as we move on down through B then, again, it kind of reiterates, no more than 25% by number of trees are permitted to be removed without permission from the planning board. It says, if permission is granted by the planning board, they may require any additional trees that are removed beyond the 25% to be replaced by depositing funds into the tree bank. There was a comment in there about, should it be may or they shall? I think in this case, we purposely put may in there to give us the leeway, if we wanted to, as opposed to, and so, to your point too, I know in the solar thing, there's a lot of things where we said, shall.
Right.
This was one of those things that we left in there, though, to give us the leeway for some special case.
Okay,
Again, it could very well come down to, I don't know, 1 or 2 shrubs, and we, maybe it would be nice to have
Yeah.
leeway to say, no, please don't plant 2 shrubs there, or, don't try to wedge so much on there, it's gonna look,
right.
won't be, maybe it'll mess up some drainage, thing, but who knows, but that's why we left that one in there.
Okay, and then as far as the 25% in the 3 calendar year, are we satisfied with those numbers, or do we want to examine those metrics?
That was the thing that, David Guides brought up.
Yeah, in the email.
Oh, okay, I'll have to,
Oh, I think that was the
He
email.
said,
point.
well, basically, he said, what if somebody happens to remove 8% of the trees each year for more than 3 years, they won't be hitting the 25% threshold.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
Yep. That is true.
That is true, it's a fact.
that, and honestly, there are some developments that take more than 3 years to go from beginning to end, and if they removed a whole lot in year 1, and then just after year 3 removed a whole lot more, they'd
Well,
be,
development would also have the minimum tree density requirements.
okay,
Are more than just P. Because they would be coming for us for a subdivision or a special permit. So they were subdivision acreage.
Lisa?
No, I was just gonna say, I know that one of the things too said is, during this, when all those articles that I was reading about how basically a lot of these developers just, they're gonna pay into the tree bank. They really don't care. They just consider it cost of doing business. And that's why
That's my-
tree ordinances
from here.
came into being. So one of the things I think, though, as we're going down here, talking about the monetary value, given what we came up when we were talking with the Northeast Pediatrics, I think we were kind of surprised at the amount that was suggested, which was what, $1,250, I think.
Mhm.
And I don't know, what do we do with that? And I don't like to not agree with our public works people, but it seems high to me. And I'm wondering, what kind of data do we have, or should we be collecting something about that?
Well, I think the purpose of valuing it like that is because if you pay into the tree bank, the village is gonna be the one installing the trees. So we have to be the one paying for the time and the labor and prevailing wage.
And
And that's,
after speaking with John further about the 1250, he was in the range of 1,000 to 1,300. And he said the reason for that is, you have the tree, but you also, for the DPW to do it, is prevailing wage. And then that, yes, it might not be that much to actually physically plant the tree, but then you have to take the time to go back and make sure it's watered properly,
Well,
and
yeah.
also taking care of it until it establishes itself. So he's figuring all of that in. So that was just further what John explained to me.
okay, I'm comfortable with that then. Just wanted to be sure that we all were on the same page.
Well, one of the other things we talked about there too, again, I don't know if this is the right place for it, or if it's later on in the tree bank section, but, it says the planning board shall have the authority to decrease this amount, but shall not have the authority to increase it. Excuse me. Did we want to, and we did this with the, or we brought it up with Northeast Peds, is, do we want to put some examples in here about, and it's not an exhaustive list of, here's what we'll consider, but do we want to put some examples of things that we might consider, like, part of this also, and I even mentioned it up there, is, to offset the effects of climate change. Okay, cool, there's other ways to do that, like solar panels. But they had solar panels. That was a factor in our discussions too. Is this an area that we want to put, or is it somewhere else? And, examples of, why would the planning board decrease the amount? Right, it's not just because we,
I think it's a good idea, similar to Drew's suggestion in the solar law, where he included
Right.
a list of criteria that may
Yeah.
be reflected upon.
So I don't know if this is the right place for that or not,
No,
or if it's
Yeah, I would be,
in the tree bank piece, but by this point, it's maybe, the tree bank's
Yes.
taken out of the equation, so somewhere in here, though, and I don't think the tree bank section is the right place, we should put some examples, and I think solar is one of them. I don't know if there's other. But that was at least one that I know we had discussed.
Yeah, no, I think we need to include it
I mean,
somewhere.
Okay,
I think the treatment piece would be the better place to include it.
the tree bank piece,
When it says like they
That's
have the
true,
authority
yeah.
to decrease, then
okay,
when taking that into consideration, blah, 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 blah.
okay.
That is where it came up and we decided on it, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it kind of made, so maybe that is, at that point, that's where we finally said that there were these mitigating factors.
Okay.
Okay.
If we move on to section 2 there, so exemptions, the removal of trees for the following reason shall be exempt from this section. So removal of horticultural properties such as tree farms, nurseries, or orchards. I know that there were some comments as we moved down a little bit. Necessary removal by a utility company where they have an easement, removal from public rights of way. When we got, I think D was the same, removal from retention ponds or easements. There were some comments once we got down to E, where, removal of any tree which has become or threatens to become a danger to human life or property is determined by an ISA certified arborist or the Village of Lansing DPW. There was a note in here.
Landscape architect?
No, this one was different, and this, Yamila brought this up, this was, this simply rewards deferred maintenance. If a property owner waits till the tree is dead or dangerous, they can skirt the need for more trees. So, right, if I
Right.
said, boy, I really want to, I think, I don't know if there was an example or an article or where somebody poisoned some trees to kill them.
Oh, no, that's up here in Maine.
Oh,
They
there you go.
did. And in fact, I came across some language, darn it, where, it's like, about knowingly destroy a tree, or I don't know, shoot, I thought I had it, we had written down, but,
So again, could it happen? Sure. I mean, I guess I think it all depends on the situation, right? I wouldn't, I'd have to wait,
put
God
any
knows how long for
ideas.
some of my trees to die to fall down, but,
right. Well, I think, the one thing that Lisa pointed out to me that was actually really influential to some of how I'm thinking about this is that, put ourselves in the shoes of, we have the sleaziest developer on the face of the planet coming in to build a thing. What are they gonna try to do to get around this? And they would do that. And so let's make sure that we're strong enough and that our laws are strong enough to hold our line against somebody who's trying to work around things.
do you have thoughts on, I mean, is there a blanket, the intentional, some
My
blanket?
thought
the
is that-
intent, like the intentional destruction kind of thing, Oh, I don't encourage persons to-
I see the point. My concern, so I guess, so my concern, which is I'll get through the whole thing, is that I don't want to prevent somebody or worry somebody from removing a tree on their property that is dangerous, but also
Right.
there's low chance that removing one tree would put you within the 25% trees of 3 years. If you have one dead tree on your property, you can obviously remove that without being in violation of this section. And I don't know the answer, is there a chance that there's like some sort of invasive bug or thing that happens to naturally kill off all of the trees on your
Yes.
parcel, and then you have to cut them all down? Obviously, you can come here and get permission and plead your case and explain it all, but that takes time, and then I don't know how quickly these things happen. So, are we making ourselves susceptible to like a very sleazy developer by allowing this? Yes. Would we also have the minimum tree density in there? I think there's probably some other mechanisms we can put in play with their subdivision requirements and their special permit, to hopefully try to offset that. And I don't think a developer would be doing themselves, if they're doing that to clear cut a lot, I guess what would be the purpose of trying to get rid of all the trees? To let them be able to develop the land? Or they already have a development and they want to remove their own trees, which I don't think they would want to do for like a housing development. None of their customers would like that, / then it would all be private property already. So I don't know how that would come into play, like what the motive would be.
I think you're,
There are
I
people out
think-
there who think of trees as being messy and a pain, so we don't want them. We only put them in because we have to. And from that point of view, an excuse to get rid of them is an excuse. Maybe if they're, I mean, here's the thing, it's completely reasonable, you know, if you've got a 1 acre property, you might have 3 trees that will be dead if you've got a really wooded property. Is there a thing, do we want to put, you know, up to X number of trees you can remove without, like, you know, do we want to put a threshold there? You know, where we think, okay, this is like 2 or 3 dead trees, like, I have 2 dead ash, you know.
Without, I don't want them to have to come to like a board meeting, like.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah, no.
like, or like something where it's not like an administrative have to wait for the next 2 weeks to come
Right.
in, where it could be a little bit the approval of DPW or Mike.
Right, because really, this is only going to be an issue if we find somebody who's trying to use that to get around stuff, and in that case, it's going to be a bigger case, and there's going to be more numbers at hand, but if it's like, you know, there are 3 ash trees on the edge of my property that need to go because the borer is here, well, you know, that's not unreasonable to say that you might need that.
Right.
So, and that could be like staff review up to a certain amount, and then above that, it has to come to a board. I don't know. I just feel like there's a little bit of weakness in there that I want to close up.
Well, we don't want people to deliberately damage their trees, like by poisoning them or anything. And I don't know if we even want to plant the thought of that for anybody. But it's been known to happen when people want certain things, they just do it.
I think those are the
So-
fringe cases though, too. I mean, like this, this is all encompassing, so I had a dead tree on my lawn. I don't want to wait for a board meeting. It was a dead
Oh,
tree.
yeah.
It died, it didn't make it, which is too bad, it was nice. I don't want to wait to come to a board meeting, I don't want
They
to.
poison their own.
Well, that's the thing too, and that's why I was
Like,
like,
Mike's not gonna then say
no,
no, you
no.
No,
can't.
I'll tell you why. They'll do it for view shed. They'll do it
No.
because
No,
they
I know, but
No,
then
she said how.
How do you prove that they
Pardon me?
poisoned their
Oh,
own
how
tree?
do we prove it? Yeah, we can't, probably.
so,
Yeah.
You're not gonna say, no, don't take down the dead trees.
right.
Or now
No.
you have to pay because all your trees are dead. I mean, because who knows what really happened?
Right.
So why are we thinking someone would do this?
Just to think worst case scenario.
To skirt around the tree removal thing, like, oh, well, I want to cut down more than 25% of my trees in 3 years.
And I
But
can
it
if
says I
they're
can't,
dead.
but if they're dead, I can do that, so I'm gonna kill them and cut them down. It's an extreme, but yeah, I mean,
But there's precedent for it happening, I mean,
It'll happen. Somebody will do it. It's just, hopefully, we don't need to do it. I don't know.
yeah, I mean,
Something to mill over.
yeah, something to think about, maybe, again, maybe there is some place or some area we can, you know, you
Do
know,
other, I'll look through all
the
of the
purposeful, you know,
ones if other statutes kind of address.
yeah, I'd have to look at that chart that we
Yeah.
made and look into those individually.
I can do that, I have some time. To see if anyone kind of caveats it.
Yeah, I couldn't really find, yes, I could.
okay. And, you know, the same thing there, you know, removal necessary for healthy trees, that was all kind of captured in there. And then pruning to encourage tree growth, right, that's not really removal, right, that's pruning, so. As we move on to C, minimum tree density requirements, there were 2 big ones here, you know, starting off right in A, there was that 30 tree unit per acre number, and I know I had said, is that the right number? And so,
Mike sent us something.
Mike went out and sent us some information that we have in front of us. It seems like, you know, this has only been enacted twice. On the piece of property next to Lisa's, it was not an issue, plenty of trees. And then when we got to Northeast Peds, which was the first commercial one, you know, they were shy. But when I look at that property, again, I've mentioned this before, I think because of the size of the building and the parking lot, they're limited. I would never look at that and say, oh, God, I wish they had more trees. I mean, maybe I would, but not the amount that they would have to get up there. So I question if that 30 tree unit acre number is right or wrong. Maybe it's right, maybe what we use to calculate tree units is wrong. Maybe both of them are right, maybe both of them are wrong, but
Or maybe we have one number that applies to one kind of property and another that applies to a
could
different.
very well be,
Yeah.
yep.
There's a disadvantage of your commercial property is they're required to have parking.
Parking, yeah,
That
whereas-
takes up a lot of
Yep,
space,
I don't-
so I don't think the numbers should be
Yeah.
identical for
Yeah,
both
I agree.
residential and commercial.
Right, and I think that's what, when Lisa and I talked and looked at some of your comments, Emilia, and we had chatted at one of the meetings too, and we said, hey, we need a residential piece, or we need a commercial piece, whichever one it is. I don't necessarily know that we need a whole separate thing for it versus some carve-outs, and maybe this is one of those carve-outs.
Yeah.
Here's the number for residential, here's the number for commercial.
Yeah, I agree. My gut is that it should be something like, deduct the minimum number of parking spaces required for your property. So minimum required is 10, and you remove that square footage from whatever the requirement piece is. If your minimum is 10, but you have 20, you've opted to have more, so I would still count that other piece against you, but I would use the minimums that we require. And then, of course, the square footage of your building. Commercial buildings tend to be larger than homes.
Yeah.
And so I would, again, can we deduct some percentage based on the square footage of your building and your parking requirements so that that number is more in line?
Well, again, aren't we bumping against kind of the commercial versus residential? I know that a lot of the other ordinances did, they'd say, well, if it's commercial, you only need 6 per acre, but if it's, residential, you need 8 per acre, and they recognize that, but it seems if we're gonna get into that, maybe we should just say residential and then commercial. And
Yeah,
have
no,
separate.
I believe that your calculation was gonna be just commercial.
Yeah,
I think
Oh,
residential,
okay.
yeah,
Okay.
residential just gets one umbrella thing, but commercial, we could,
formula.
because there's so
Okay.
many variations in commercial.
Yeah.
Whereas residential, there isn't obviously, but there's kind of a limit to how big a residential place is gonna be.
Well, yeah.
well, and I think with
And
the
we-
commercial one too, it's interesting, right, because Northeast Peds, because they can't fit it there, they don't have the number of parking spots they
Yes,
require.
yeah.
So I think you have to look at,
Yeah.
right, there's we just can't have that many spots, we literally can't fit it here, okay, well then, here's how we're gonna, I like the calculation versus saying,
Yeah, and
oh, well, for commercial, it's only 20, I'd like to, put in some logic behind, okay, well, it's 30, but if you can't meet that because, minus this, minus size of building, whatever, I think that's a much better approach.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us as a planning board the flexibility to meet each person who comes to us where they are.
And I like not just going with how many spots you have, but the number that you're required to have, so not
Right.
to incentivize people just blacktop.
Exactly.
In Northeast Pete's case, though,
Well, yeah,
they're
but
required to
I'm
have
thinking
70, but
about,
they only have
we
45,
know
so,
that,
yeah.
Like the Taco Bell, for example, we know they have more spots that they necessarily need for now, and we talked about them backing some out to add
Yeah,
trees.
so I think that would be the way to look at it, though, whatever you're required to have, or what you do have, whichever is, greater or less, whatever way we want to go, but that might be so I think that,
We addressed part of that with the parking lot and street trees sort of later, so it makes sense to do it here too.
The other thing too, which is a different, but I just want to make sure that it's not something that we're going to write in here, but I want us to be aware of it, is that we need the ecosystem services of trees even more in our more built-up areas, right? So it's not that we want a lesser need in our commercial areas, we just want to right-size them, but I think it's really important that I'd be more lenient on residential properties than I would be on commercial properties, because this is where the exhaust is. This is where we want more buffering, more aesthetic buffering, and we want better, air and water flows. So I just want to make sure we keep that in mind when we think about these.
And I wonder, Mike, if using that calculation that Yamila just said, what northeast would have ended up being, and see how close it is, if you could do that,
I could do that.
see if that would fit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you could come, and just, if you have, suggestions for, what the calculation should be. And there's, right, there's all kinds of little caveats, but what if, I've got the main building, but I also have this huge storage shed over here, or I've got, are we gonna count the, the paved area where places are required to keep their dumpsters in a large development, but some sort of concept about that, I think, would be, see what you can come up with. Get that calculator out with the paper roll on it.
Baker's hat.
Ideally, if you could come up with a formula, that'd be great, but a formula that would actually fit for everybody.
Yeah,
Right, well,
right, and I think,
the formula will get us close, and then if we write this well, we will have the leeway to move that formula one way or the other.
yeah.
Natalie, can I offer you a lozenge? They're homemade honey elderberry. Oh, okay.
But thank you.
What? Mine's similar.
Yeah, those dang kids.
Okay. The next line down, so under minimum tree density requirements, B, only trees with a diameter breast height of 4 inches or greater will be counted towards existing density. There was a comment, we allow shrubs to be part of the tree unit count, so it might be appropriate to count large shrubs or multi-stem trees toward the count too. We don't have multi-stem trees in the chart, and right, there are some really nice I have 2 in my front, well, maybe one.
Yeah, and we should be able to count those.
And yeah, I mean, I'm fine with my tree density, but yeah, I mean, I can see where those, that's an area that we omitted out of there. I know the shrub discussion is a interesting
Yeah.
topic for discussion.
Whoever, I'm not married to the shrubs, guys.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not either.
I'm not-
I like my shrubs, but I don't care.
right,
think-
but
I
at the
think-
same token, I don't want somebody to come and be like, or a developer will say, come and be like, this is gonna be great. I've got this gigantic
Boxwoods
building.
everywhere.
I am gonna circle the building with 2 rows of boxwoods deep.
And we're done.
Done, right, so there's that.
Exactly.
So I wonder if it's like, a value up to, again,
Yeah.
I don't wanna complicate this by this calculation and be like, sure, yeah, shrubs count, but they can't count for more than 10 trees. I'm like,
This is
oh,
really
yeah.
into understory, overstory.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you even need to have shrubs in here, unless they're large? I mean,
I don't think we need to, honestly. I mean,
I've decided that I think shrubs make this more complicated, and that I believe people use shrubs as landscaping. I'm more interested in the ecology of all of this stuff, and I think shrubs matter, but I think people do shrubs anyway, so I'm figuring, like you said, they're gonna put shrubs around the building just for landscaping, but I don't think it's the same. I've had trouble with shrubs for a while.
yeah,
So I
I
would
do
be-
too. I think it's cleaner to get rid of it.
I
I'd
would
rather
be happy to-
complicate it. I'd rather complicate in the direction of like shade trees versus like small fruit trees than have trees and then shrubs. I think that makes more sense.
How does everybody feel about that,
Shrubs
though?
are so dinky when they start out.
That's the thing, yeah, I mean.
Like, my boxwoods are gonna take years to come up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I am not, I guess my question was, with Northeast Peds, how did shrubs factor into their count?
They put them in front of that row, so they use them.
It counted as a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for
But
them to,
is that a tree or landscape? I think we like shrubs in front, if they happen to have their parking so that they're facing the road, you want it to buffer the lights and whatnot.
yeah, but there's other options to do that aren't shrubs.
Or they can choose to use shrubs, but they just can't count towards the tree.
Yeah.
Sure. I just wonder if that's limiting again, and, because they do provide good erosion control though, too.
They do.
They do provide, I'm just thinking, some of the other things, definitely windbreaks at a certain maturity, they will.
To me, I think it makes, we had a big discussion about the understory, overstory, trees are not like okay, but if we wanna limit the percentage of a certain type of thing, I think you could limit the percentage of shrubs rather than understory, overstory, deciduous, conifer, like. Because as one comment said, things are not getting to their maximum
Right,
overstory.
not here.
Not
Yeah,
here.
no. But none of them, I mean, if you plant an overstory tree versus an understory, neither of them are ever gonna reach the full,
Yeah.
the theoretical height, but there will still be the differing heights of them, just
Yeah.
Northeast had a 21 count
for shrubs.
for, no, for the entire site, 10 of it was shrubs.
Almost half.
Yeah, so almost half. I mean, if we want to keep shrubs, because we want to encourage, like, buffering lights and stuff like that, maybe it's a thing where, we can't, shrubs can be counted, but no more than like 15% of the total, or
Yeah.
something like that. And then it keeps it in there.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want to put a number, because
Right,
based on the
yeah.
lot size, you could
Yeah.
put in what the
Percentages, though.
percentage makes sense.
So, but that percentage for Northeast Peds would have been what?
Would have been about 50.
About 50%, so I
So if
wonder.
you're gonna lower the, I guess, the value
Right.
of the shrubs, we probably ought to lower the tree unit, because
Right.
a tree is gonna take up so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only plant in an area like this, you probably only plant a couple trees,
Yeah.
couple, 3 trees, or shrub, you could get away with a lot more, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a gentleman coming to talk to us about, maybe he can help.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
interesting, yeah.
he'll be the expert on that kind of stuff.
How many shrubs is too many?
I think that the thing is, the answer is diversity is what you want.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
We want all of them, we want overstory and understory, we want large shrubs and small shrubs, we want conifers and deciduous, we want them all, because that's what makes a healthy landscape, and that's what makes a more attractive space, and we'll do the buffering job and all that kind of stuff, and the windbreak job, so we need them all. So how do we write this so that we include and encourage all of them?
Yes, you can use these. I like the concept of, if we're gonna keep it, because that does encourage that sort of thing, to say, a nice clean way of saying yes, but no more, and maybe we can, I don't know how many shrub thing, oh, there is only one shrub thing in here, but I mean, maybe there's a way to clean it up.
Yeah.
It's like, minimum 2 gallon size times 4, yeah, so maybe there's a way to clean that up.
I would, honestly, I think doing gallon size is a little bit problematic, because that never tells you, like, how big the thing's gonna get. Like, I bought a tiny little 1 gallon elderberry from my front yard, that I made those lozenges out of, if you want one. That thing is now over 12 feet tall. I could buy a 2 gallon knockout rose that will never get more than 2 feet tall. So it makes it's, with shrubs, I think actually with all of these, the end point is the more important measure than the beginning point.
Back to where you were concerned about someone who did a development to put 2 rows of shrubs all the way around. If it's gonna be something like that, you gotta remember, they're gonna be in front of the board, all you gotta do is say no,
Right.
then it's not gonna work.
Disapprove the
That's
plan.
right.
Yeah, but it wastes everyone time. If we give them good boundaries, they come to us with a better plan to begin with, rather than, waste another week of like, oh yeah, come forward with a thing we're gonna refuse.
I guess they could always ask for a reduction, something, if they can't fit it in, but I think one of the things is, and we've mentioned in the past, that, was that you want to avoid monoculture, and you want to, support diversity. Because I also, going down farther with this whole understory and overstory, and as it turns out, if a tree is exactly 40 feet, it's over and under, because it's less than and greater than. They never address the fact that if a tree was 40 feet, that was neither. It just seems, I don't know. It just seems complicated, again. And I think too, that where I am now, I have trouble getting certain trees to grow very much, very tall. So, I don't know, you could always do that, but I don't know. And then the whole evergreen and, setting percentages. I don't know.
No, I think percentages of evergreen versus deciduous is probably a wise thing if we want to really get that diversity, and it's kind of the only way we can enforce that.
Okay.
The other thing too is, I could see how, if we play our cards right and do it well, we could pretty much have like an Excel spreadsheet that we just plug it all into, and it spits out a number at the end, and it makes it actually fairly easy. We could even provide that to developers and say, you need to meet this number. It might actually make things smoother, but it would be a little bit more work to set it up.
That's the formula method, yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Somebody must have this already.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
yeah, I would kind of like to underscore my opinion is, and I'm glad to hear Natalie said this is a good idea of having some limiting percentage of evergreens. It doesn't seem to be, at least right now, much of a problem in Lansing Village, but it's, I'm in Ohio right now, but as I drive around and see new developments, it's so common to see basically dirt, I'll call them dirt fences, a mound of dirt with grass on it with just plunked on uniformly spaced evergreen trees. It just doesn't look right. And it's not visually appealing. It's not good landscaping, and certainly they don't provide the shade that deciduous trees do. And as we've talked about, we're looking for variety and diversity of,
Yep.
of foliage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe one of the things that we can ask next week when, no, in 2 weeks when Jen is here is, in a good functioning landscape, what percent is, would be deciduous and what percent would be coniferous?
Yeah, I think that's great.
That's a great idea.
And this also, just to point out, is specific to new trees.
Right.
So we don't take into
Right.
account what is already there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so they could have a field of evergreens and then,
Yeah. Only have to add one tree.
right.
What do you do?
Staying in this section, see density may be achieved. I don't think I had any comments. I know Yamila didn't, Lisa didn't, but on C, D, E, F, or G, any of those areas there, it's pretty much, other than in D, where it references, developers still have to comply with the code section for buffer strips. That's outside this tree lot. We do want to go revisit that because I know there were some comments that you had, Yamila, and Lisa, and I came up with some thoughts about some of those too. So we do want to go and revisit that. Same thing, right? No, you can't use prohibited, invasive species. We're not going to let you do that to have them, no, those don't count, sorry. And then G is just a reference down to the appendix.
Where are you?
Still under minimum tree density, number 1, just those last D, E, F, and G. I don't, unless anybody had any comments in there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
2, tree planting plan, a tree planting plan conforming to the minimum
We go
density.
back to, sorry,
Oh, yeah,
about how buffer strip plantings don't count.
sure.
Depending on the size of the lot,
Yeah, you kind of need them to count.
You need it.
and I think this was a discussion had when we were first doing this, is I don't understand why they're not counted.
I want to say there was a comment about, again, depending on the configuration of the lot, somebody could have a clear-cut lot with like a very long buffer that met all the tree units there and then not put anything anywhere else on the property.
Right.
But then you also approve the landscaping plan,
Yeah,
development.
Yes, but we can't just say, well, I mean,
Is this one where we can just use the word may instead of shall? And then we leave it to our discretion? So if someone has a really like beautiful, robust buffer, and but we're also gonna look at the buffer, because the buffer might shift too. Because I could also see a situation where maybe it's a smaller piece of property where they've met their buffer, and their buffer basically gives them
The coverage.
the coverage they need, and then all that's left behind, there's really not a lot of room. Then we have a situation like with Northeast again, where there's really, like, we couldn't fit the required trees and what's left over. I mean, maybe we have to talk about how, maybe you remove the square footage of the buffer strip from the calculation of the acreage, so that we're only calculating, again, similar to what we were talking about with commercial, you're only calculating basically the empty land. You're not calculating the buffer strip, you're not calculating the minimum parking amount, you're not calculating the footprint of the building, you're just calculating everything else there, and then we can see about what we apply.
Yep. Something, because I feel like that's unfair for smaller
Yeah,
Yeah,
lots.
Because your buffer strip is gonna be the responsibility of the commercial property when it abuts to a residential area.
yeah, see,
In general, you're going to have less working space, as we spoke, because of the
Right.
parking lot, and
Yep.
everything else. So if you don't count some of that buffer, they'll never reach the
Yep.
units that they need, depending on what you calculate, what units are gonna be required for.
so that's a question that I had. I didn't quite understand why the buffer strip is always going to be the responsibility of the commercial property. And that's, I can only assume that that was because we thought we were done with residential development and we were only gonna do commercial development from that on.
I wasn't here
Like-
when the buffer strip was done. I don't know
Yeah.
when that went in. When the buffer strip section went in.
When? Oh, I don't know. I can find out for you.
Yeah, well, before your time, at least.
Yeah.
But it's funny, it made, I thought to myself, well, but if we get a residential developer who's building a residential neighborhood that abuts a commercial, why would the commercial be responsible for this new development that comes in?
Oh, I see.
You know, because it reads that the commercial property is responsible for the buffer.
Would a commercial property then have to go in and put a buffer in? I don't think
I
so.
don't think so if it's existing, I mean,
Yeah.
East Point, for example.
Yeah.
East Point came in,
Yeah.
they were not, and neither was 20 Bomax required to put a buffer strip between there, because East Point was the second, they came there second.
Yeah.
Right,
They can't very well require the.
So she's saying we should have required East Point to put a buffer in.
right, like if,
For example, like, I mean, Lisa will remember doing Nissan. You know, they redid everything with a special permit, and they're right next to Gaslight Village, so they were required to put in the buffer.
right. So, but in East Point, we did not require East Point to put in a buffer strip, even though they went in next to commercial property, so now that residential is not buffered. Because our.
Yeah, I wasn't here when we did East Point,
So
but
now
yeah.
that if 20 Bomax
That's
or a PDA, they will be required to put a buffer in
Right.
because they're doing a
But she's
PDA.
saying, should we change the buffer strip to require any sort of commercial to residential butt up for the
Period.
residential developer to have to put in a buffer strip?
regardless of whether it's, both
Right.
sides are responsible.
Yeah.
so that's a question for the buffer strip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
buffer strip.
And that would have an influence on how we want to count things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of confused about that, because it made it seem like,
Well, and there's that gray area too about like commercial development versus not, right? I'm not going to build a house somewhere. It's a developer coming in to build lots of houses.
right,
That's a
Is that-
commercial
that's a
activity, but it's
commercial endeavor,
residential.
it's a commercial activity, but
commercial
residential
activity.
zoning, and so we need to
Yeah.
be clear about that.
And so,
Yeah.
but, and that's come up a few times with different things too, even aside from this.
Yeah.
Was that residential or commercial? It's in a residential district and.
Right.
The district.
It's a
the-
commercial activity, yeah, I mean,
Right,
So buffer strips.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, how does this interact with buffer strips? Oh, boy.
Maybe we can just write the word may instead of shall. And when we address buffer strips, we can tighten that up, and then those two will work better together. I don't know.
Yeah, plantings added to meet the buffer strip may count towards minimum tree density.
May. But they may not.
Exactly,
Discretion of the planning board.
yep.
So it may not
May.
count.
So get rid of shall not, and we'll say may count towards the minimum tree
Oh,
density
you gotta get rid of
at
that.
discretion of planning board.
Okay.
Okay, so are we moving on to number 2?
No, go ahead.
When we're talking about minimum tree density requirements, at the very beginning, we say, any major subdivision or activity that requires issuance of a special permit shall conform to the regulations of this section. Do we still want to keep those two criteria as being the factors that initiate this?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too, actually. Why did we say just major?
I was gonna say minor would be
Because a
another
minor
option.
would be, I think, I thought we thought it would be onerous to those people, so like, who's the Newsheen did a minor subdivision. But didn't she also need a special permit?
Yes.
So she was
Yeah,
fine
I
with
was gonna
trees.
say, I guess I just, yeah. I mean, even if it's a residential, single family, it's a special permit. No, no, it isn't.
It's a minor
Minor
subdivision.
subdivision.
You're dividing one lot into two.
What
Well,
about
she-
up
yeah,
on
that was-
Dart, at the bottom there? I mean, there was a whole lot going on there, right? They had a big piece of property. That was a minor subdivision
Yeah,
initially.
they did a few times.
They did a few times, right, so that would, nothing in that would have triggered this, and that might be an area where we wanted them to come back,
Yeah.
right, there were some other issues there.
I did have that circled myself. Why did we, how is it we decided just major subject and then or activity that requires the issuance of a special permit? It doesn't make sense to me
I
quite.
think we thought that if they were doing anything then more after the minor subdivision, they would come to us anyway for the special permit. I'm not sure. My thought
don't know.
was, we have now seen some things that trigger a special permit, which may not necessarily make any changes to the outside of the home, i.e. your neighbor.
Yep.
And do we want that to trigger the tree law?
Right.
Is more so where I was getting with that comment. Or the bees. The bees have nothing to do with the exterior, they're not taking anything down. Do we want to make them plant trees because they want bees?
As
Not
it
every
turned out,
special permit is alike.
Yep.
Right. And I guess that's where we have that, we may
Yes,
waive these
may.
things.
We need to definitely add that.
Just food for thought.
Yeah.
So would we strike the word major and just have any subdivision or activity that requires a special permit?
I don't think we want any I think we want major subdivisions, I think it's the special, it's the activity that requires the issuance of a special permit that we might want to.
That's such a big umbrella of
Right.
things.
no, I was gonna say, I don't like that for some
We
reason.
can
I
think
don't,
of we can think of two cases where
Where
maybe.
there's a change.
see, I would like actually Dart Drive to have to comply with this.
Right, and that was too, right, and I think that gets into the point too, as we talk about developers, and I'm not making fun of the folks on Dart Drive, but we'll talk about them. Who knows, maybe their plan all along was to come in and do a minor subdivision, then another minor subdivision. And right, there's ways to skirt around getting, as demonstrated elsewhere in the village, to skirt around it being a major. You can do it, takes a little bit longer, but you can do it. So maybe, I don't know.
I
I'm
think,
less concerned about, if we had the may and, you know, we change up the units for a residential lot, I'm less concerned about the minor subdivision than I am for a special permit that doesn't change the footprint
Right.
of a property.
Yep. B is, and I think the B is no footprint change.
Yeah.
I want to change the use of this building that's already there,
Yeah.
no footprint change.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, then do we even just say that? Do we want to say specifically that special permits that do not
required.
require a change in the footprint of the building may have this requirement waived?
Maybe we can figure out what those types of things would
That
be.
basically solves your, like a home occupation also, that would
Yep.
be cumbersome for someone to plant trees in there if they just want to open up an office.
Exactly. Lisa's neighbor, remember? He just wanted to renovate.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. I would be absolutely in support of having that.
Are there other special permits that you can think about where, or other things that trigger a special permit that we're not thinking about?
That don't change the footprint where you think maybe we would want a tree change, like I just can't think of anything.
Well,
Any improvements on the property.
what I could think about is that, let's say there's a property that was just kind of bare anyway, and this is an opportunity
wanna
to
fight it
encourage
out.
them to do that, we might want to leave that as an option, like, I don't know, there,
Yeah, I guess you could add it to like a criteria for waiving that the special permit doesn't change the footprint,
right.
in lieu of just automatically taking it out.
I mean, eventually, we're gonna have Airbnbs, which is gonna, may involve a special permit, we don't know, and that's not gonna really change the footprint unless you're adding on or whatnot to it, so. It may be a good thing to put in there, it doesn't change if you don't change the footprint, then you don't need to, tree law is exempt from it or whatnot.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say exempt, I'd say may be waived And that way, we can have an opportunity, because there might be something that comes forward, like, we might say, we probably want to be a little bit more strict on people who are using it as Airbnb instead of, residential where people are actually living in their homes.
That's a quasi-commercial activity, and
Yeah.
But even if you put a maybe waived on the whole thing, you're gonna have that no matter what, that's kind of a blanket maybe
Yeah,
we're looking for anyway, in some cases.
That's true.
right. But I guess it's to give people guidance.
As a criteria, I envision when we said it could be waived, we list like Drew suggested in the solar law.
Yeah.
Reasons why it could be waived, and not changing the footprint might be one of those reasons we can list. Because, yeah, I think there is a time where you want the bite of the apple and the opportunity to force somebody to add, but oftentimes,
Right,
with like Lisa's neighbor and the bees, it's not.
right.
yeah, or a change to the office, to an office space, like you
Yeah.
said, that's,
Yep. If we could get through 2, tree planting plan, that would be good enough.
okay.
Pause. But so this is, has conformed to the minimum density requirements submitted as part of the subdivision. I think this note came up a couple times. This was a suggestion from Emil. It says, prior to submission, this plan must be approved by ISA certified arborist to ensure blah, blah, blah. She said, or a registered landscape architect. So are there others that, does it have to be an ISA certified arborist, or can it be anywhere we mentioned that is a registered landscape architect also okay? I'm fine with that. I mean, for these things.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah. I think it makes it more user-friendly. I've had one discussion with a developer that claimed it was difficult to find a certified arborist, and I was like.
but I'm
"Don't-"
sure that they had
I was also like,
a
"But I don't-
landscape architect,
I don't
like.
believe you, but
Right.
you sure?
Yeah.
I was like,
Right.
but the guy.
Harder than the person they already have on
office got
staff,
one,
yeah, I mean, and I'm fine with that. I don't see any harm in that. And Lisa or Jim, any thoughts on that? You're muted, Lisa.
You're still muted, Lisa.
Lean on.
There you go.
No, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Okay.
Make it more accessible.
Yeah, and again, then there's, that's referenced in here, if you, actually, I think in the next one down, if you go down to A in that section, a 2-scale site plan prepared by the development architect or landscape
There you
architect.
go.
So I think that, that's another, and I don't think that's too dissimilar from how we work with developers on other stuff anyway, it's,
And frankly, the
Landscape-
developers are gonna have a landscape architect.
yeah, that's the thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it easier for them, and I don't think it is anything that really introduces any new risk for the board or the village, so I have no issue with that. And I didn't just say, let's get through 2, because I was like, oh, this is gonna be easy, I didn't know what was in here, so. Location of all existing trees that will be maintained on the site in addition to all new trees, sure, that's pretty standard. There was this note here, and I think this is a good one. So all trees drawn on the plan will show canopy coverage at mature height. Yumila pointed out the trees around here don't get to their mature height. The note was 10 years of growth or some percentage of mature size. If you look at mature size in books, it refers to an old tree that has been growing in an ideal location for decades. With our shallow soils, we will rarely achieve those sizes. Basing a design on a mature size will result in less canopy than we desire. So, yeah. So I think that would be fine to change, right? Instead of saying mature size, say.
At 50% of mature size, or some percentage.
After 10 years of growth, or 15 years of growth.
That might be harder to do, just because things grow at different rates, but we, in terms of like, a person drawing their circles on their plan, it's really easy to say 50% or 60% or whatever, as opposed to having to go to every tree and say, okay, your rate is whatever.
Yeah.
So.
So it's 50% of the mature size, what is it?
Yeah, so what do we
50%
want?
what?
I think that's a Dan question.
Yeah, we can ask Dan.
He has a lot of really good experience of how big the trees will actually get here, and he could probably, speak to that.
Right.
I guess it's gonna be more like probably 60%. It's gonna be not quite, but yeah, it'll be something.
All existing trees should be labeled and verified by an ISA certified arborist. Should we also put landscape architect in there too, I assume?
Well, the other thing too about that is there, when somebody, you get a landscape architect or an arborist who makes your plan, then you go to the nursery and you purchase your trees, it's assumed that, like, the nursery people will have labeled them properly. I mean, obviously, like, you just go and check anyway sometimes, but like, you usually you have a trusted tree nursery that does that part. So I'm not quite sure how onerous that ends up being or how necessary it is.
Well, we already said they have to be no less than 2 inches. So
So you're just saying, like,
they have to buy trees that are no less than 2
Joe
inches.
Smith's greenhouse is labeling something as a cherry tree when it's a
Right,
pineapple tree, I don't know.
yeah, it's,
Hopefully it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that's something.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It kind of falls into the same category as, like, right, we don't have the tree inventory. There's
Yeah.
certain things we just can't police.
and I guess the question I have here is this: does that mean, like, when we talk all new trees to be planted will be labeled inventory, does that mean like in the plans? On the plan, okay, as opposed to inside, because that,
Yeah, this is under the tree planting plan section.
okay,
So, yeah, it's got the inventory aspect, which, again, it's not any different, right? The plans that we get, when we get an official plan, it's got the locations, the
Yeah.
numbers, the species, the size.
yeah.
Especially for developers, like,
Yeah.
a residential.
Okay, yeah, in that case, then D should just say, arborist or landscape architect.
So we can include landscape art, yeah, okay.
And in fact, arborists very rarely do planting plans. Arborists do things like, they check your tree for health, they identify your tree, they don't usually plan the aesthetics, that's not their expertise.
Right.
So that should be landscape architect or designer, it could be or designer. We're asking for stamped drawings, right, so it's gonna be stamped by an RLA anyway.
So is the proposal to say arborist or, landscape architect or designer?
Yeah, that'd be okay.
Yeah, and I think we should probably, if it's the right thing to do, right, match those three terms up in all the sections, right?
Yeah.
Unless there is a section to be like, no, this can't be an engine, this has gotta be an ISA or a landscape architect. We
Right.
don't want a designer to do like this section, but if it's appropriate for all the areas, let's do it for all the areas and make it, again, consistent.
Yeah.
So that they're like,
Wherever you need a stamp drawing, it shouldn't have designer, but if it's just a planting plan, a designer can do that. So I think that would be take a look, and wherever you think we really need a stamp drawing, that's a different story.
So is the proper term landscape designer?
Landscape designer is anybody who designs a landscape, and that could be anybody. A landscape architect is somebody who's registered, it's a protected and state registered license.
Okay,
So a
So we're-
landscape architect can stamp drawings that could be accepted by our zoning officer, our code officer, so a building department. So you need to be able to stamp drawings for certain things, but tree planting, you don't always need a stamp drawing.
so is our proposal to say arborist or landscape designer, or, I'm sorry, arborist or landscape architect or landscape designer, is that where we're heading?
I think once Mike looks to see where we need stamp plans, we'll figure out
Yeah,
if we can tighten it up to 2 things everywhere, or maybe it's
Or maybe a definition.
a definition section.
right, like, for instance, if you go to Cuba Landscape and you say, please design this for me, they have landscape designers, they don't have registered landscape architects. They will still do an amazingly good job.
We would probably be very happy with their planting plan.
Right.
Right, but they're not registered landscape architects. So I want to make sure that we give people the option to hire whomever they want and have that be a broad enough thing without it stepping on toes of things needing stamped.
Well, and ultimately, I mean, right, a developer's gonna come back, and if they want to include that information from a designer in their plans to us, and they stamp that, I mean, there has to be some sort of, right, I don't want them to just be like, oh, yeah, we got this from somebody, and it's in there, and bam, it's the thing. But so, yeah.
Yeah, in that case, what often happens is, like, sometimes the architect will include a planting plan done by a designer, and the architect stamps the plan.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right, yeah, right, it's a designer, so they can't stamp anything, but they can give it to the architect.
Exactly.
The architect will put it in with everything else,
And if
the
they
architect can stamp stuff, so that's fine.
So now we're talking about globally, I envision, everyone's thinking about a big development. Let's revert back to the residential person that this is going to affect.
Right.
Are they gonna go out and get a landscape architect to stamp their tree plan?
No, they're gonna go to Cuba Landscape or Plant.
So I want to make sure that we have that distinction, someone there, that if there is a requirement for a stamped plan, it's not gonna make Joe Schmo, who wants to do something, go get a landscape architect.
I wonder if this is another section where we need to define differently between residential and commercial. Or maybe we can just
Do we
say,
require stamped plans
for,
in here?
I don't know why we're even thinking about having stamp plans for something like, the only time I've really seen stamp plans is if you've got some type of structural, structural.
I don't think there is a requirement.
so maybe
that it's
just for
stamped
the
by
tree
everybody.
planting plans that we normally get, they're not stamped, they're just, oh, no, because, yeah, okay.
So a landscape architect could put in roads, could put in stormwater, and those need to be stamped. But usually planting plans don't need to be stamped.
I will say that my neighbor, actually, Zach, looked at the yellow pages and found an ISA certified arborist fairly readily, and it was only about $150.
Yep.
'Cause
Oh, yeah, the person that called me, I let him know that we had a civilian that was able to find one quite quickly, so I'm sure he'd be able to do so. But, I just don't want to make it too onerous on the
Right.
residents trying to do things.
Yeah,
But,
so-
no, there isn't a requirement for. a
So if there's
stamp.
no, I mean, maybe it is as simple as us just, maybe it is an ISA certified arborist, a
Landscape
landscape architect, or a landscape designer, and then that fits into, kind of
We can
depends on.
define them as like a tree professional or something.
Oh,
so we don't-
definitions, oof.
That's a different.
I don't want to repeat that 3 words over and over and over again. It's
Yeah,
gonna
we can
be.
clean that, that's fine, yeah, okay. That's it for D, and we're at about time. I wanted to save a few minutes for the last couple items on the agenda, so. Yeah, well, and so we've got the speaker at the next meeting anyway, so we can ask some of these questions,
And I
and,
feel like general conditions is really where that Dan will come in handy.
yeah, absolutely, yep, and that's the next
That's the next
section anyway,
of
so,
that.
yeah, and I know Yamila had some comments in there, so yeah, I think that'll be good.
So will you send around the latest, is it the version that Mike sent tonight?
Yeah, that's
Is the
what we, yeah,
I'll be working with when Dan comes?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the one that Mike emailed around tonight, and that we have a copy of in front of us, is the one that is currently village code. So that's the one that we should work off of.
So it's just the village code, okay,
Yeah,
all right.
okay, so yeah, we'll pick it up next time, or if we have time, or at the next meeting we have time, we'll pick it up, and then at the next meeting, obviously, we'll have that presentation, so discussion, whatever you want to call it.
And if there are any specific questions that any of us have for Dan, let's just email them over and I'll collect them into one spot and, mail them over to him.
Yeah. Next item on the agenda is the trustee report. There was a trustee meeting.
It was a pretty short meeting. So they voted in favor of the local law B tax override. They had a request for a water sewer adjustment for 95 Brown Road. Apparently, they had a water main break over a weekend that cost them. Their charges increased during that period. So they voted to waive the village surcharge as a one-time courtesy. There were no changes to the draft budget, so the public hearing is set for next Monday, April 15th. They passed a resolution to increase the Village of Lansing water surcharge from 60% to 70%, and that's effective July 1. They did their usual around the room, people that are working on individual projects. The solar law did come up. They asked Susan how we accepted their changes. And they, as you know, Mike sent out an email, they wanted a joint meeting, and they thought they could accommodate it at their meeting next week after they approve the budget.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, other business. Lorraine?
I don't have anything.
Neil? Pat? Lisa?
Yeah, so I think it was Lorraine and Yamila and I attended the parking webinar, was it?
Oh, yeah.
I had not read the book, so, but I do think that one of the things that came out of it was something that we're sort of addressing with, when we talked to Taco Bell about, do you really need all those parking spots? Especially with drive-through having changed so much over COVID and whatnot. So I think it's something that we have to be thinking about ourselves as we look, at developments and whatnot. As to, do we really need some of the parking spaces, depending on the type of business?
We'll have them put a tree in instead.
Yeah, exactly. But, it was interesting. I don't know whether Lorraine and Yamila have something else to say about that. The only other thing is, are we absolutely having the joint meeting on April 15th?
Yes.
Yes.
And so, I would just like to put in a plug for us all. Will we all be working from the same document, the one that they sent with the changes?
Yeah, that's the latest. I don't think there's another one in
Nothing's been done
circulation.
since.
If there is another one, Lisa, then Jody will be sending it out, because she's sending out the legal ads that we're having the special meeting, the planning board is having the special meeting, so.
Could I put in a request that the document have page numbers on it? So that while we're discussing it, we could maybe say on page 3, paragraph so-and-so? Because I think it would make things go a little more smoothly.
So we all have to be there in person? Is that how?
No, you don't have to be necessarily. We have to have, the planning board has to have a,
vote.
right, the planning board has to have a
You just
quorum.
have, yeah.
I plan to
There's
be
not
there.
gonna be a vote. You don't really need a quorum, there's no vote.
We have to open up,
You'll have
The
to
Yep.
board of trustees can open up.
no, the trustees opens a meeting, then we have to open up a meeting too.
open up.
Oh,
So we have to have a
We
quorum.
have to, no,
There's
we
not,
still need a quorum.
but yeah, just have a quorum, I guess.
Well, I'll be there. Lisa, will you be
I'll
there?
be there. I will be there.
In person,
In person?
Wouldn't miss it.
I have to take the notes anyway.
Okay. Emila, will you be there?
I have a presentation to another board that day, but I should, if it's 7 o'clock, I should be fine.
It's at
7:30.
7:30.
Oh, then that's fine. That's,
Jim, will you be back or not?
I'll be back in Ithaca, but I will not be able to attend.
Okay. Well, we'll have a quorum, so that's fine. Excuse me. Lorraine or Emila, anything else you wanted to share about the presentation that Lisa mentioned?
Oh, I just want to thank you for sharing your emails, telling us about these things.
Oh, sure.
I happen to know, I know Nick from working.
oh, fantastic.
For 7 years. So anyway, I thought it was really interesting, and I really enjoyed it, and I wish I had read the book. I didn't realize there was a book that went with it, so.
Yeah, I will pass around my copy
Oh, okay.
as soon as I finish,
Oh, okay.
about, I don't know, 3.
So I got it on Amazon, I was actually gonna buy it, and I was,
Yeah, no, I'll happily share my copy. The other thing too, that later on in the year, when we start looking at our chart, we do have parking minimums on things.
yeah.
And this kind of begs the question of, are our parking minimums appropriately sized for what we actually do and use and need right now? So we have the opportunity, if we're gonna look at those, let's ask that question.
Well, that's, I think, the big thing that came out of it for me. Yep.
yeah.
And as a home rule state, we can change our minimums to whatever we want. We can abolish minimums if we want, so we have the right to do that. So let's think about that.
Because I think that the 2 instances that have come up since I've been on the board have been the dentist and peds who needed more
Yeah.
parking.
Mhm.
And they're the only ones. Other than that, we have plenty of parking, except maybe like at certain holidays or whatever, and that, and as even Taco Bell said, well, drive-through has become the thing. And they have enough space, they can always add more if it turns out. But I think we really don't want any more impervious surface than necessary, frankly. We want more trees.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, anything else, Lisa?
Nope.
Anything from you, Jim?
No,
Natalie?
I just will not be here next Monday for the joint meeting, so Peter will be in my stead. He's been reading the solar law though, so,
I'm sure it's been,
yeah.
okay. Mike?
Only a couple things. I did email Representative of Brixmore to let them know, that you're concerned over the Hugo mall parking, especially with the stop signs and the pass-through over there. Not, I don't know if there's we have any leverage to do anything about it, but I did send it to them with our concerns. And the other thing is, I had an email today, it looks like the folks that are coming in for the storage facility for Dick's, looking at the 30th.
Okay.
As long as they get their items in by the 17th.
Is that gonna be a formal presentation or an informal presentation? Formal, okay. Okay,
Going in hot.
I guess so. Okay,
Okay.
do it. Okay.
Is that gonna be a special permit?
It's a special permit.
Oh, boy, trees.
Oh, you know, I did have,
Yeah, how does that work with it being in a mall? I mean,
Well,
It's still a lot, it's subdivided.
It's subdivided, so they own a
have the
portion of the
parking
parking
lot.
lot.
so I had asked them, just to remind you, I had asked them when they originally came here whether they were looking to purchase that parcel that was subdivided off of the mall, the whole Dick's through the Best Buy, or were they just renting it? Because I wanted to know who was gonna get hit with this whole tree law. And they said they were looking to purchase it.
oh,
Well, so that's an interesting thing, though, to take into your calculation, you know, as we're talking about, well, maybe we take a lot and we reduce it by the square footage of, you know, the building,
This
and
small
and I was like, well, they don't have any land, so, right, it can't just be a wash, there's gotta be, or if it's a special case like
How many
this.
spots do they need?
Right, how many spots
They
do you
don't
need?
need all
Okay,
those
well, the rest
parking
of them, because
spots.
there's a section in here too about, you know, parking lot trees, so.
yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I
honestly,
would
what
say,
Cayuga, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was gonna say what Cayuga Med did with their
Exactly.
parking lot trees is so much more attractive. That if we wanted to say, like, here's a really great example of how we can convert some of our parking lot to be a friendlier parking lot, yeah.
I think I was gonna say the same thing, is first of all, we do have a thing that when that was developed, all of those parking lots, I don't think they complied with the code. Because we have in our code parking lots where there's supposed to be a tree every 40 feet or something, don't we? I think so, but at any rate, yeah,
It's the cover.
we do have,
Every 8th vehicle or something like that, every 8th spot. There can't be,
yeah, every 12 spots or something, but we asked Cayuga Medical and they did it. So I think we have to just, we've got our first precedent there, seems.
Okay.
And then I forgot, I did have one other thing I wanted to ask, and this is a question for Mike. Can we get an update on what's gonna happen on,
Graham
right
Road.
across here, the small road that now the village is going to do some work on, in front of the Peds? Yeah, Graham Road.
full print. I can
Oh, great.
Right to the page so you can see exactly what it is.
Excellent, yes.
when's that gonna start?
I think it's page 4.
Yeah,
Or what?
what's gonna happen there?
So is it gonna start soon?
I don't know, I don't, I'm involved in that, so.
When's the next set of deadlines for the?
First,
May 1st. Yeah, May
Is
1st.
it 15th in there somewhere?
I have that email printed out.
How did everybody know what you were talking about?
Come on now. Mike,
We're all psychic.
was it May?
I printed it out, it's right in my drawer for the next meeting, so.
You find it, you know, it
No, this is where the,
should be Graham Road West, it should be.
yeah, no, this is just Graham Road, not Graham Road
Is it
West.
something that you have a question about for the meeting tonight, Emila, or can we?
Oh, no, it can be just for, yeah.
I'll show you.
after.
I can take a look after.
Okay. Well, with that, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:30 PM.
I motion to accept.
Motion by Lorraine, second by Pat, all in favor? To adjourn? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Susan.
Right.
Have a good one.
The eclipse was great.
Oh, yeah. Good.
yeah.